Alrighty, time for something new on this channel. It's going to be a movie review, but I'm only doing it because this was a very, not necessarily a political movie, but it's got a political guy who spearheaded it in the form of Steve Dace, who I think is a very good commentator. I like his show. I think he tends to be pretty based on a lot of his opinions, and he has moved, rapidly over the last couple of years, and there are some people who a few years ago I wouldn't have thought were, particularly interesting, but who have really developed. And he's one of them. And to me, it comes across as genuine. And there are a few people like that. Another one would be, Daniel Horowitz, who used to guest host for Mark Levin, of all people. I would have never thought that, Daniel Horowitz, who at the time, he looked to be, the next Ben Shapiro, would turn out to be a very interesting political commentator with, not the kind of opinions you would expect from a Ben Shapiro clone. And so I went to see Dace's movie. I think his only title, actually, with regards to the movie, was executive producer, because he wrote the book, but he didn't write the script. And so I guess I'll start with positives. Well, let me give an overview of the film, because most of you probably aren't familiar with it. Dace is trying to. He claimed that they wanted to target the movie at like the horror film fans, normies. But I'm not really sure how effective they were in that. At least at my theater, which I went to see two. I haven't been to this movie theater since, like, what was it? Star Wars Episode 7 came out. Long time ago. I don't go to movies very much, and that one wasn't very good, so I never went back to see any of the other Star Wars movies, but it's a topic for a completely different channel and a different day. Anyway, I went to two movies yesterday. They were both pretty much empty. There were like 7 other people in both of them that I went to. And so the first one I went to was Steve Dace's movie. And I was by far the youngest person in there. There were like 6 or 7 other people in there, and they were all relatively old, like 60 plus. And so at least in my area, it didn't appear to me that the film was reaching its target demographic. Now, with that said, I'm not so sure how much this film would have really spoken to that target demographic of a 20-something normies. I mean, it's got a good premise. The premise is you've got this atheist psychiatrist or psychologist, I forget which, who is interviewing a serial killer who claims to be possessed by a demon. And I think, that's a good premise for like a horror movie. And really, it's not a horror movie. It should be more suspense, although frankly, I did not feel much suspense. On a meta level, what you have going on is you have this psychiatrist who is a highly educated, affluent white liberal who is being red-pilled by the demon. And I think that's a really cool idea. It could have really worked. But to me, and the acting was not the problem. The acting, I think, was excellent on, for both of the main characters, both the demon and the normie atheist. But I just felt like the script was too straightforward. It did not really subvert my expectations at all. And the whole purpose of this movie was to be subversive. I just didn't feel it from the words that were being spoken. The performance was very convincing. I thought it was really, really good, how he would go back and forth from being, the demon to being the person who was possessed. But trying to put myself in the shoes of the psychiatrist, I don't feel like he would have been moved on a moral level. To me, it felt like he was moved on out of fear, because mild spoilers here. I mean, I don't know how much I really want to spoil, because I don't know if it's worth spoiling, to be honest, because I can make my points without getting into specific details. But the the demon convinces the atheist guy that he is, who he says he is, by telling him, intimate personal details of the psychiatrist's life that, only someone with an omniscient point of view could know. He tells him things about himself that, no other individual would know unless they were supernatural and were able to, see inside his mind, or, look over his shoulder, without being there, kind of like, God or some other spiritual entity. And that to me felt like, what was the pivot point for that character. And so I don't feel like that has broader implications outside of the context of the film. I don't think that that's going to move the audience. If you go in as a normie atheist, or just someone who is, tepid. I mean, I'm fairly tepid about religion and spirituality myself. I'm not a churchgoer. But I ironically, I agree with the, with most of the moral lesson. Well, I don't want to say moral lessons, but the point of view of the film. I mean, you can tell what they think is right, what they think is wrong. I agree with their values, but I was not moved in any sort of spiritual way, and that's, to me, what the point of the movie was supposed to be. It was supposed to be unsettling, and it was supposed to, essentially provoke people like me into, coming to Jesus or something like that. And from that, based on that standard, I don't think that the film succeeds. Now, does it succeed in just being an interesting movie to watch for 90 minutes? Yeah. The last 10 minutes aside, last 10 minutes were completely unnecessary, and I don't know why they put it in there. And every review that I've read says the exact same thing. I mean, the last 10 minutes is the main character, the psychiatrist guy. He wrote a book, and spoiler alert, it's the book that the movie's based on. Har har, and it's him doing an interview promoting the book. So it's like, and it ends with you saying, "Hey, it's wherever books are sold." It's like, wait, did I just watch a 10-minute commercial for the book that the movie's based on? And so, I mean, that was just, I mean, it was meta, very meta, because the movie's billed as, it's a prequel to the book. It's like, well, the movie is how the book was written. It's like, oh, come on. I mean, it's kind of cool, but like the way that they did it, it's just like, at the end of the movie, I felt like I just watched a 10-minute commercial for the book that this is based on. But up to that point, it was entertaining to watch. I did like the interactions between the psychiatrist and the demon serial killer. And knowing that this is written by devout Christians, I figured the one place, even if this is well written, I figured, well, the one place where they might run into trouble with normies, is if they really do a full-throated attack on abortion, because that'll just completely, that's hard to be subtle about, because abortion is not a subtle thing. It's not a subtle topic. It's pretty in your face. So how do you even address it? And you have to address it in something like this. But how would you address it subtly? Ironically, I thought that the scene that dealt with abortion was the most effective part of the movie. It's the only scene to where I feel like it really challenged his worldview on a, moral level. And by that I mean the worldview of the psychiatrist / stand-in for the audience. The rest of the movie, I felt like he was just being challenged to believe that the demon is who he says he is, not that his worldview is wrong, which is what I think it should have been. I think that the demon himself was written to be way too straightforward, because he was not hiding the ball at all. He was just, he was basically trying to convince the psychiatrist that he is real. And to me, I think this film would have been better given what the mission, according to Steve Dace, what the mission of the film was. I think it would have been much more effective if it were written more like Silence of the Lambs, and if the demon character was more, used the Socratic method. Because I feel like, if you compare, the character's name is Nefarious, that's the name of the movie, that's the demon's name. You compare his character to, like, Hannibal Lecter. Nefarious comes across as much more of like an arrogant punk, rather than an evil genius. And he sounds more like he's bored with this psychiatrist rather than he's trying to use this psychiatrist to get what he wants, which is, again, one of the plot points of the film. It's one of the threads, is that the demon is trying to use this psychologist to get him to do his bidding. And so I figured, well, if you're trying to do that, you should be trying to manipulate him a little more subtly, not just tell him, hey, I've got this plan, I want you to do this thing that I need, and I think you're the guy to do it. And so the fact that, not only is he really straightforward in completely giving away what his plan is to this psychologist guy, not only does that seem kind of foolish at the time, well, by the end of the movie, I guess this is your spoiler, the psychologist does not do what Nefarious wants. He goes against what he wants and says, you know what, no, I don't think the eternal damnation, I don't think that's for me. So I don't think I'm going to sell my soul to the devil. Because that's what's going on. It's a conversation between the two of them, and the demon is trying to convince this psychologist to sell his soul to the devil, and he will give him great riches or whatever. But I didn't find him very persuasive. To me, watching this movie, it seems like it was a pretty easy decision to not take up Satan on his offer, that was presented through this emissary. I think I've seen a lot. I've definitely seen other films where you have this choice of selling your soul to the devil. I mean, it's a trope, basically. It doesn't even have to be literally selling your soul to the devil, but giving up who you are in exchange for material gain. That's been done a million times, and it's been done better. I didn't feel like they did that here, and that was the whole. And when you have something like that that's not perfect in a film that is this lean, there's no real special effects to distract you from this movie, which I like. Something that I heard Jordan Belfi, who plays the psychiatrist, that he said in an interview was, it's a real movie, which is true. And I respect them for doing that. They made what is a real film. It's all acting and cinematography. There's barely a soundtrack. And so you really, as a viewer, focus on the core ingredients and what really matters. You focus on the acting, you focus on the writing. And the acting, I thought, was solid. The writing was a bit lacking. So, all in all, do I recommend seeing it? If you're interested, I'd say go ahead and see it. It's not bad by any means. I didn't think it was a bad movie at all. I've seen plenty worse. There was nothing in the movie that made me roll my eyes. There was no cringe. It was just, I went in with pretty high expectations because Steve Dace set very high expectations for his viewers, and he repeatedly said, I'm setting really high expectations, but I don't feel bad about that because I fully expect that the movie will meet and exceed your expectations. And it's good that someone feels good about the product that they're putting out and that they really believe in it. I would be much more skeptical of this movie, to go see it if the one of the core creative minds behind it didn't believe in what he made. But nevertheless, I don't think that this was a masterpiece. I think that this I do think that this should have been written differently. And I'm not a writer, so it's not my it's not like I'm saying I could have done it better. All I'm saying is I've seen this done better. And you could have still done it and kept the same sort of core implied values. I mean, in this, nothing is implied, which, at least, they're honest about that. The movie is not subtle about, what its worldview is, which is fine. You can do that, but you have to do it well, and it has to be convincing. The only thing, I guess I will spoil this scene, the only scene that I really found, the best scene in the whole movie, is where Nefarious exposes this psychiatrist for being a dirtbag who talked his girlfriend into getting an abortion that she didn't want, knowing that he was going to break up with her anyway. And that's what really gets into his head. He's like, wait, how'd you know that? How did you know I'm going to break up with my girlfriend anyway, even though I just, talked her into getting this abortion that she only got because she didn't want me to leave her? It's like, that's a way of getting an abortion that I think a normie could latch onto, because it's not just the fact, it's not just that it's an abortion, it's that he was really scummy about about it, and so that was good, and it made him it did make him as a character question some things, and really shook him. But the problem is that whole thing was precipitated by the demon being omniscient. So again, it like most of the conflict in the film, or most of the tension, comes from this demon being omniscient, and knowing, being able to know everything about this guy. And so I like that part. I like the part about how he dragged him for having his own sick mother euthanized. Again, makes him look like a dirtbag, and gets the life issue in there. And yeah, I'm not presenting the scene well here. I'm not going to reenact it for you. I'm just going to say I thought those two parts were well done. What I would have really liked to see here, though, is the psychiatrist not just being scared. I wanted to see him tempted. That's, to me, what I was expecting out of this kind of a story. I wanted this guy to slowly get into his head without him knowing, subtly. In the way that that Hannibal Lecter got to Clarice. Now, maybe if I get a chance to see it again, maybe I'll rethink things. I've heard a lot of people who said, hey, I feel like I need to go back and watch it again, see what I missed. I didn't get that. I didn't feel like I was missing a lot when I was watching it the first time. It seemed pretty, it wasn't moving super fast. It had a decent pace. It never felt slow. But it just felt surface level. I didn't feel like there was any deeper meaning to most of the lines as they were coming out. I mean, there is an interesting unspoken conflict between the psychiatrist, an internal conflict. And by the way, if this seems very unorganized, it's because I don't take notes. This is all stream of consciousness, so I'm jumping around here. So forgive me. If you want proper film reviews, there are other channels for that. But considering that this is supposed to be a red-pilling movie and a red-pilled movie, I feel like it's in my wheelhouse to discuss it and its cultural impact. Anyway, there's an interesting conflict towards the end, to where this psychiatrist's job, or psychologist, I forget which, is to do he's supposed to be doing a psychological evaluation on this serial killer, because he's on death row and he's supposed to be executed. And so he has to either determine him to be, sane or insane. And so this decision on his psychological fitness is a proxy for really the character's atheism. If he holds fast to his atheism and doesn't believe in demonic possession, he would have to declare this man insane, because the character very clearly has two distinct beings within him, or two distinct personalities, and he firmly believes what he's saying. So either he's insane and shouldn't be executed, or he's sane and actually demonically possessed. And so in the end of the movie, or towards the end, the psychologist does sign off and declare him sane, which de facto means that he accepts that, yes, he really is, possessed by a demon, and that is true. I didn't feel like there was there was as much weight to that decision as there could have been. I was conscious of it, but I can easily see a lot of people not making that connection, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. You don't have to say everything. In fact, like I was saying, I wish this movie could have been more subtle. And this is an example, a good example of where it was subtle. That is a subtle thing if you think about it. By signing off on this guy's execution, he is accepting that hell and demonic possession and all these things are real. So overall, I wish that this sounds weird considering this just came out. This is the kind of movie I think could really do well with a remake. It should be remade. I mean, not, it's. I want there to be more of this. I don't want people on the right to not make movies. I think it's a good thing that someone on the right tried to make a movie. I wish it was, a masterpiece, the greatest, work of suspense fiction, in cinema in the last 20 years. I wish that were true. But I did not, I didn't find the demon character, well, I mean, he was creepy, but not wasn't disturbing. And one more thing I want to say about the script. The script was not poorly written in the sense that there were lines that just came across as flat and, and bad, and, it wasn't stiff, it wasn't awkward. It sounded natural, but it just didn't, it wasn't impactful. Like, each individual line of dialogue on its own, pretty much I had no problem with. I didn't think that any of it sounded bad and didn't break my immersion. But on the whole, you add it all up, I didn't get a lot out of it. To me, it was a movie I went and saw once, and, the credits rolled, and kind of, it's already over. It's out of my head. It didn't make me think, which is the opposite that I've heard from, other people who had seen it, the advanced screenings. That's what it's telling. Oh, it'll make you think a lot. It's like, I don't know, am I an idiot because I didn't think about it? I mean, I don't know. I don't think I'm an idiot. I feel like again, this is supposed to be marketed at normies and red pilling normies. That was the pitch that I heard for this. Another idea that I have that might have made this more effective, what they were going for, is if Nefarious was more personal in what he was talking about. It was very grandiose. It was very meta. But I think what impacts people more is anecdotal stories. That's why I think that individual cases, like if he had talked about some of the evil things that he did, while inhabiting, his host spot. If he had, described it in a little more detail. Think about like the line with Hannibal Lecter, where Clarice says, oh, but you killed him, and then he says, I ate his liver. That scene had a lot of weight to it because of that. I mean, that really, it was shocking and disturbing to the audience. There's nothing really like that for Nefarious. He doesn't get that. The closest thing to it is when he has. Now, just to be clear, the abortion scene, there's no abortion on screen. There's an abortion occurring off screen, and that's what he, and that's his omniscience is showing him that. And he's, and that's when he starts talking about it to try and get to the, get inside the head of the psychiatrist. He's like, your girlfriend's getting an abortion right now because, she doesn't want you to leave her, but then you're going to leave her anyway. And then, as he's talking about it, and the guy's going, shut up, stop it, or, whatever. The demon character is basically having an orgasm simultaneously with the abortion. That was creepy and disturbing. But, it needed more than that in the 98-minute runtime. Oh, and there are a couple of plot holes that I noticed. One is there's this scene where there are prison guards present. There are corrections officers standing around the table. And Nefarious takes the chain, that he's shackled to the table with, and whips it around the psychologist's neck and pins him to the table, and is choking him out. And he's, saying, hey, and he says to the guards, don't come any closer, or else, I'll snap his neck or whatever. And so they just stand there, doing nothing. And then, he's saying to the psychologist, he's got him pinned on the table, he's going, beg for your life, Jimmy, beg me. It's like, I didn't see what purpose that part really served, because I was more distracted by, why aren't the corrections officers, pulling out their guns and just shooting him? Because sure, if you say, okay, well, if we try and pull him off, he could snap the psychologist's neck. Okay, I'll give it to you. You can't beat him maybe hand to hand that quick without the psychologist getting killed, or at least having his neck broken. Why can't you shoot them? I don't get that. Why don't you have guns? Do corrections officers not carry guns? That would seem odd to me. I don't know. Maybe it's true. Maybe that is accurate. Maybe in Oklahoma, corrections officers don't have guns. But then later, at the end of the movie, there's a cop who, it's not clear if he's on duty or not, but he's present for the execution, in the observation room, where we saw at the beginning of the movie, when anyone comes into the prison, they have to, you can't bring in any weapons into the prison from the outside. Well, this cop has a pistol on his belt. So how do you get that in? Is he on duty? Is that why he's allowed to carry a gun? Well, why is a cop from outside of the prison allowed to carry a gun in the prison when the corrections officers supposedly don't even have guns? That part didn't make sense to me. But, that's pretty good. Those were only two, actual, plot nitpicks that I had. The rest of the movie, it made sense. It wasn't bad. There was not, it was not full of plot holes. It was not full of contrivances. To the contrary, it was fine in that department. It just didn't achieve what I heard they were trying to achieve. I think it fails in that sense. It succeeds as just a movie that you watch for 90 minutes. I'm perfectly fine recommending it if you just want to go sit in a theater and watch something. I thought it was fine. But I did not find it moving. It was not, there were a couple of uncomfortable scenes, like the execution. That they did a good job on that. Because he gets the electric chair. That looked believable. That was unsettling to watch. I was not looking forward to it, and they built up to it. For quite a few minutes. They were building up to it. With him being in the holding cell. And then, and then them walking him down it, not the Green Mile, but you know how the Green Mile is. He was walking the mile, and they get to the room, and and he's struggling and resisting, and they have to strap him down. And the chair, of course, looks completely barbaric and torturous, and there's people sitting on the other side of glass, watching. And so that scene, was unsettling, but it was. I didn't walk out of that and say, you know what, I'm going to go, I watched it on a Saturday, right? I didn't walk out of that movie and go, you know what, I'm going to church on Sunday. I don't know. And who knows, maybe I was expecting, maybe they weren't trying to go for that. Maybe they weren't trying to get you to walk out of the movie and go, you know what, maybe I need to go to church on Sunday. Maybe they're just trying to, challenge you a little bit to think about supernatural stuff. But there are other horror movies that do that. There are other suspense movies. There are movies about demons, okay? This is not the first. That's not what made this movie unique. So I wouldn't call this a negative review. I have more positive things to say about this movie than most newer films. This has a lot going for it, but it's not a home run. And I was really hoping it would be a home run. On the right, we just don't get a lot of home runs when it comes to film. The last great, right-wing movie, and it's hard to even call it right-wing, it's just against the commies movie that I saw, was The Lives of Others, which was really moving. It was really, unsettling, and it, I thought was, fantastic. I was hoping that this would be, the next right of center movie to really be impactful after The Lives of Others, but it just wasn't. But it could have been worse. It could have been a really preachy movie with right-wing values that had no entertainment value. It wasn't that. Although the last 10 minutes did push you on that, because the last 10 minutes was basically the movie telling you what to think about what you just watched, which is that's completely unnecessary. Because, spoiler alert, the guy doing the interview in the last 10 minutes, I don't think that this was a good creative decision. It's Glenn Beck. So they have the character being interviewed about his book by Glenn Beck. And so Glenn Beck just says to the guy, he's like, wow, so you got to, spend all day talking to a guy who was possessed by a demon, huh? He's like, well, yeah, that's what he said. He's like, oh, so do you like believe in, hell now? He's like, maybe. It's like, what was the point of that? But anyway, I'm willing to forgive that because it was such a different tone from the rest of the movie. It doesn't even feel like the same thing. It feels like the movie's already over by the time you get to that. To me, the movie is when he arrives at the prison, from that time until the the execution, and that and there's a little bit that happens after that, but pretty much that until the end of the day. And there should have been an epilogue. It needed an epilogue after that, but this was not the right kind of epilogue. Like, it's hard for a movie that is just people talking to each other to not feel exposition heavy, but it's, like, that's a challenge. But if you're going to go that route, to where your movie's going to be just two people talking to each other, you have to rise to that challenge. So with that said, this went a lot longer than I thought it would. Listening back to it, it probably will sound like a mess. It will sound like a bunch of ramblings, but if you happen to be someone who comes to this channel and listens to me, and you have heard of this movie, maybe you'll find some of my thoughts on it interesting. Or maybe you saw it yourself. If so, let me know. I'll be interested to see how much money this makes in its limited release. It's got a great score on Rotten Tomatoes. Last I checked, it was like 97% audience score. That's a good thing to have for your movie. It was like a 29% critic score, so of course critics aren't going to like it, because they're going to tear into it for all the flaws that I mentioned, and then on top of it, they don't like the message of it. So even if this was, absolutely out of the park, home run, 5-star, 2 thumbs up, all the platitude, all the cliches that they use in the movie business, they would have hated it. Critics would have hated it anyway. Now, what I'd be most interested in is if you went into this movie as a left-winger, or someone who is not overtly right-wing, which, whose law is that? I forget who it is. The law, it's some law that, anything that is not overtly right-wing will become left-wing. Anyway, if you're someone who is in that category and you went to this movie and it changed your mind about how you see the world, let me know. And if you can't explain that, because I just didn't see it. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.